32 at O'Hare. Next news at 8, Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by CharlesEquipment.com, keeping you powered up no matter what the conditions.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Will Senate Republicans ever get those articles of impeachment? That's something Josh Hawley, who's a senator, Republican senator from Missouri, is anxious to obtain. And he wants to put Nancy Pelosi on a 25-day clock to move this thing along, as he explained to Fox and Friends yesterday.
You know, Nancy Pelosi is attempting to obstruct a Senate trial. That's all there is to it. The Constitution says that the Senate is the one that will have the trial. It says the trial will follow the impeachment. Now she's trying to prevent a Senate trial. She's trying to obstruct it. She's trying to upend the Constitution. So here's what I think needs to happen. We need to change the Senate rules to allow the Senate to dismiss this case if she refuses to send the articles over. The Senate has to act. We've got to say, send us these articles or we're moving on without you.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats have the first fierce urgency of getting around to it when there is some discernible political benefit to be had, and there doesn't seem to be any at present, with the possible exception of making a few squishy Republican senators a bit more nervous than they normally are. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by George Parry, former federal and state prosecutor, regular contributor to the Philadelphia Inquirer and blogs at knowledgeisgood.net. George, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, glad to be here.
What do you think about Josh Hawley's sort of comparison to Article 3 courts? What we need here is a motion to dismiss if they're not going to present the articles, put her on a clock, and let's move this along.
Well, that would certainly be the result in an Article 3 court. You would just move to dismiss for failure to prosecute. But, of course, we're dealing with a wholly political process here, and whether the Senate majority would have enough nerve to actually pass or change the rules as proposed by Senator Hawley remains to be seen. As you pointed out in the intro, you've got some squishy rhinos, like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who probably, look, what do I know? But my sense is they would not go along with that. They would want to appear to provide a full-blown trial in the Senate. Whether or not that would ever happen, of course, is up to Nancy Pelosi. She may or may not send those articles of impeachment over. The whole thing has just been a political show from start to finish. It isn't a real impeachment. It's not a serious effort to remove the president from office. It's just designed to dirty him up as much as possible for purposes of the upcoming election.
Well, you're a man after my own heart because you've used both a World War II metaphor as well as a Mel Brooks metaphor to describe Nancy Pelosi in this process. So, Bastogne or Cleavon Little, you start wherever you want.
Well, in terms of the Bastogne reference, I did an article for the American Spectator, and it's also on my blog. During the Battle of the Bulge, when the Germans came through the Ardennes forest in 1944 and caught the Americans and the Allies by surprise, there was a conference that Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, called of all his generals, and they were kind of worried, what are we going to do about this? And that was when General Patton said, he said, look, this is an opportunity. He said, the Kraut stuck his head in a meat grinder, and this time I've got the handle. And so I used that in my article, that this time, with this impeachment, the Democrats have stuck their heads in a meat grinder, and the president and his allies should just start cranking that handle. I think they have presented the president and his team with a golden opportunity to just destroy them electorally, because the whole purpose behind the impeachment, what they're claiming is that he had tried to recruit the Ukrainian authorities to investigate Joe Biden and his wastrel son, Hunter Biden, to see if there was any corruption there. And of course, there had to have been. When Hunter Biden was placed on the board of this corrupt gas company, Burisma Holdings, and paid between $50,000 and $83,000 a month, at the same time that Joe Biden, who was our point man in Ukraine, was over there handing out billions of dollars in foreign aid, and at one point withheld the foreign aid, or threatened to withhold the foreign aid, if the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma Holdings wasn't fired. And I said, look, this is a golden opportunity to get into all of that. That would be the heart of the president's defense. And, you know, if the Democrats really want to die in that ditch, that's fine. As for the Mel Brooks, the Mel Brooks reference, when Nancy Pelosi held up the articles of impeachment, she started making demands that, well, you know, the Senate's going to have to change the way it's going to handle these charges, the trial procedures, before I'll release the holdings. And I couldn't help but think of Blazing Saddles, that scene in Blazing Saddles where Cleavon Little, he's named the first black sheriff in the history of this town full of white racists. And so when they surround him with drawn guns pointed at his head, he pulls out his gun and sticks it to his head and says, nobody moves, or the you-know-what gets it. And, so I just thought, that's exactly Nancy Pelosi's strategy. She's, go ahead, break our hearts, Nancy. Don't send those articles of impeachment over to the Senate. I'm sure they're really worried about that.
Well, if I could respond to the Blazing Saddles reference, you've got to remember these are just simple Democrats. They're people of the land, the common clay of the New West. Morons.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's my best. Gene Wilder's the Waco Kid. There you go.
Hey, George, I wanted to ask you, yesterday we learned that former Ambassador John Bolton, he wants to testify in the impeachment trial. What do you make of that?
Well, you don't know what's going to come out of that guy's mouth. There are reports that he doesn't really agree with what Trump has done. But look, on the basis of the articles of impeachment that are there's nothing there. I mean, whatever Bolton could testify to would be completely irrelevant, it seems to me. They've impeached the president for, number one, exercising his constitutional obligation to enforce our laws by requesting assistance and trying to find out if the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, was bought and paid for by a bunch of corrupt Ukrainians. That's the first article of impeachment. Number two, the president has been impeached for, God forbid, asserting executive privilege. And the Democrats went ahead and pulled the trigger on that one, even though they never bothered to go to court to challenge his assertion of executive privilege. I mean, those are just non-starters. I mean, they're ridiculous articles of impeachment. There is no high crime or misdemeanor in either one of those things. So if Bolton wants to testify that, well, with this Ukrainian thing, I was opposed to the president saying whatever to Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, or whatever he wants to say about what is going on in Ukraine, I don't see that it makes a bit of difference. The articles of impeachment are hopeless. Well,
and also, I mean, to be clear, Bolton is saying, I will testify if subpoenaed. That's not necessarily the same thing as being itching to testify. Otherwise, he could do it, he could have done it on the House side. Number one.
Oh, yeah.
Number two, with respect to Bolton, as you say, this is sort of the same place. I have a policy disagreement. I didn't like the tone of that phone call. Is that the basis on which to remove a president from office?
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, Bolton's position, I will testify if subpoenaed, is the same as Joe Biden's most recent position. So I don't know what the celebration is over.
Well, the one thing that you have to keep in mind when it comes to this president and the media, they're always looking for something to criticize him about. And, that's whatever he does, whatever he says, they're going to come out jumping up and down on his head. So,
And
I don't see that.
a former, so as one prosecutor to another, not me, but a former prosecutor, Trey Gowdy, who was on Fox the other day, and he basically said, look, this isn't about removing Trump from office. They know they can't do that. This is about trying to middle some Republican senators in swing states in 2020 and maybe make impeachment a way to get back the Senate, which seems to me almost as much of a lark as trying to remove the president from office. But he said, look, to your point before about you don't know what Bolton's going to say, these witnesses that Schumer wants and that Senate Democrats want, you should get the articles of impeachment, have each side present their case, and move for a vote. Vote your shares already because it is a political process, and you don't want to go into any trial not knowing what may come out of the mouths of any witness.
Well, yeah. And, the Republicans make a good argument, of course, that the time for gathering evidence was in the House, the investigative phase, and it's a little late to be going over to the Senate side and saying, well, Senate, we want you to now finish up our job for us by calling even more witnesses. And I get that procedurally. Certainly, if this was a criminal case in federal court, that would be totally improper. But look, this is a completely political process. These guys can do whatever they want. And, if they want to call witnesses before the Senate, fine. The rules allow for that. But if going back to, say, the Bill Clinton impeachment, I was fortunate enough to go to that trial in the Senate. And there you had real crimes that had been brought forth as the basis for impeachment, including perjury by the president, the chief law enforcement officer of the country. And there were no witnesses called in that case. It was all arguments based on the record that came out of the House investigation.
Yep.
And at the end of it, even though the evidence that had been gathered by the House was crystal clear that Clinton had committed crimes in office, the Democrats in the Senate had no problem whatsoever voting to acquit. And it just underlined to me the fact that this isn't really a legal proceeding. This should not be even compared to what goes on in criminal court. It's wholly political, and it all comes down to whose ox is being gored, and that's how this thing's going to get decided. And you got 51 Republican senators. The Democrats may be able to peel off a few of those, a few of the squishes, but the bottom line is it takes a 2/3 vote to remove the president. So everybody knows where this is going, just as I might add during the Clinton impeachment trial in the Senate, despite the brilliance of the House managers who were presenting their case, and these guys were brilliant, including Asa Hutchinson from Arkansas, who is maybe the best lawyer in the room. Everybody knew where this was going. I mean, I remember looking down into the well of the Senate at Ted Kennedy and Chris
Dodd.
The guy from Connecticut.
Chris Dodd.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Making their dinner plans.
They were sitting there passing notes back and forth and joking, and some of these guys were walking around, going from one desk to another, joking and doing whatever, while the House managers were presenting this overwhelmingly compelling case against the president. So, yeah. But I get a kick out of law professors saying, well, in a criminal court, this wouldn't happen. Well, yeah, in a criminal court, you can't walk around the courtroom. These are senators. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, but this time, George, you understand Democrats are prayerful and heartbroken and sober. Yeah, okay. George Parry, Former federal and state prosecutor George Parry, regular contributor to the Philadelphia Inquirer and blogs at knowledgeisgood.net. George, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Time's running out to win $5,000 a week forever from Publishers Clearinghouse. Enter now at PCH.com and you could win $5,000 a week for your life. Plus, after that, $5,000 a week for life for someone you choose. Don't miss your chance to win because $5,000 a week forever is guaranteed to be awarded on February 28th. Enter at PCH.com before it's too late. That's PCH.com. Better hurry if you want the next big winner to be you. Enter at PCH.com now. Entries due 2/25. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited.
This is a Jackson Hewitt Tax Service announcement. Don't want to wait weeks for your tax refund? That's a reason to go to Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. File your taxes with Jackson Hewitt and ask a tax pro how you could get up to $3,200 fast with a no-fee refund advance. It's a 0% APR loan from MetaBank that's available before your tax refund is, so you could get money when you need it. Go to jacksonhewitt.com to learn about availability, terms, and how you could get money on a prepaid card fast, like